Welcome to the Leading Conversations podcast, sponsored by the Excel Leadership Network. On each episode, JD Pairing will have conversations with church planting pastors and leaders from around the country. You can learn more about how to connect with Excel at the end of this podcast. Let's join JD now and listen in on this leading conversation.
We are so happy today to have the great Ken Hendrix with us as our interviewee here on the Excel Leadership Podcast. Ken is from Kentucky / Tennessee. He's right at the border there. He's doing ministry, and I'm loving the chance to hear Ken's story. Ken, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, JD. It's quite a surprise that this would happen.
Yes, it's wonderful. Hey, tell us your story, growing up and how you came to Christ and all of that.
Well, my parents my dad was in the military, so they're originally from Louisiana, Arkansas area. When I was born in Germany. My dad was stationed there in the military, and lived there for about 3 years. I remember little of Germany. Grew up in Texas, San Antonio. My parents, I tell people all the time I had a drug problem, because my parents drugged me to church all the time. When I was born, my dad decided then that he needed to get into church, and he made a faith commitment. He stopped drinking, stopped smoking, and the joke was he agreed to do that. My mom would lose some weight, and she's been on a diet ever since. Those are her words. But anyway, so I grew up in church, and I would say, if you're going to ask me my profession of faith and all that, I'm like the blind men that needed to be touched twice. I came to Christ, as a young kid, but I just didn't have the understanding of what I needed to have. Kelly and I got married. She became a Christ follower, and it just renewed my faith, and we got serious about it. So for about 10 years, I worked as a CPA, and in 1989, God called me into ministry, and I've been in ministry since then. So quite a few years.
How did that happen? How do you go from being a CPA to in ministry?
Well, Kelly and I were working at a church in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, the home of Rush Limbaugh. Anyway, and we were working at a church there, and we were doing youth ministry. I got laid up during tax season, which is a crazy thing, because I'm a CPA. For about a week, I busted my ankle rather, and I was laid up, and so it meant I had a lot of time on my hands, and it just hit me that I felt like God was calling me into ministry. So Kelly came home that evening. She was a nursing student at that time, and she walked into our bedroom, and I said, what would you say if I told you I believe God's calling me into ministry? And Kelly said, it's about time. And so, there was something there that, God had already been speaking to her as well. So she, like I say, she was a student. And so one more year of school, and we kind of started doing ministry, worked at a couple of small churches in Southern Illinois, and then went to seminary. Went to seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, at Southern Seminary, pastored churches in Southern Indiana. So that's, and I continued to do accounting work because I had clients that were good friends and that sort of thing. So that was how we made the leap. I was 30-something years old. I think I was 30-something years old, or almost 30. What would that have been, 1986? Yeah, I was 32, 33 years old. And after I went to seminary, we ended up getting two new babies. We adopted while we were in seminary. We adopted twice, and so we have Caleb and Kyle, and anyway, they just incredible sons. So I kind of veered off the path there a little bit, Jamie.
No problem. Yeah, your sons are incredible young men. So, and you were doing ministry. You're pastoring. You're also doing music. You get kind of a little country bluegrass deal going on, don't you?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to learn how to play the banjo still. And I got a mandolin and I play guitar. And so the church that I'm serving right now, I'm helping to lead worship. In fact, right now, my son, who is stationed at Fort Knox, he's at Fort Campbell, which is right outside. The church I serve is right outside Gate 6 at Fort Campbell. And so our primary constituents are all military. But Caleb, who plays piano, who's played music with me for a lot of years, he is right now doing some training here at Fort Campbell. So we got him on the weekends. So for the next several weeks, at least, we got a piano player along with a guitar player. So yeah, I use my music to do ministry too, as well.
And then you came out to God's country out here in California.
Yes, I did. I moved out to California in 2001 and served as a associate pastor, youth leaders / worship leaders / whatever else needed to be done at First Baptist Church in Clovis, California. And I was there for over 16 years. So a long tenure. Up to that point in time, I'd only served at churches 3 to 5 years. But we invested there. And moving back to, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, moving back to Kentucky was kind of not a surprise. We'd always planned to do it. We just weren't sure about the timing. But everything kind of fell into place. My dad, in 2017, my dad turned 85. And I said, oh my gosh, we're not going to have much more time with him. And at the same time, my father-in-law had been diagnosed with cancer. And so we made the decision that fall that we needed to move back. So that summer, we started making plans and we moved back and to be closer to family.
And you were planning on starting a church there. I know you,
right.
In Clovis, you took over as interim, and then you were the pastor, and then you had this desire to maybe go plant back home.
Right. Well, the idea was going to plant was, okay, what am I going to do? I didn't feel like that moving back here that God had released Kelly and I from ministry. So we felt like we needed to look at something. And so that's when we went to the center there in Cincinnati. Had a great time in Cincinnati with a lot of good people there.
The Discovery Center. I remember
Discovery
that
Center, right. And I never really saw myself as a church planter. But I knew that I needed to be engaged in ministry when I got back here. So we moved back and we started looking at the area and identified a specific area in Clarksville called Kenwood, as a matter, because there were a couple of churches there, but none of those churches were growing or engaged with the community. Most of the people who attended those churches were from outside of their community. And it was, anyway, I still have a heart for that area. But in the midst of all that, a church that had asked me to do some supply work, then all of a sudden their pastor resigned. And then I started serving as their interim for a bit while they had a search committee together. And COVID hit, and it just kind of turned everything upside down. And we were scrambling there to start making everything digital. And by the end of May, the church and the committee just said to me, look, you're our pastor. We want you to be our pastor. So, that was the decision. So the church had gone through a very difficult season. I'll just put it that way. And they had already declined quite a bit when I stepped in as interim. We started to see some improvement, some traction, if you will, by the end of 2019 and early in 2020. It was like, oh gosh, we're really starting to click and looking forward to a great Easter. And then COVID hit, and that changed a lot of things. The church and the work here is a struggle. One of the things we talked about before we started is it's military, primary military. So it's you have people flowing in and people flowing out. There's not as much of that as there used to be in the military. There's a lot more stability. However, even with people planted here, they're going on deployments and they'll be gone for 9 months and then they're back and then they'll be gone for 9, so there's a constant shift and that sort of thing. And that creates a challenge. So one of the decisions we made as a church is to look at our mission is always to make disciples, but to understand that we have to see that God has placed us here in order to receive Christ followers and people who are far from Christ, and to grow them up as best we can and encourage them in their faith so that when they leave, they're leaving as missionaries. And we're trying to really teach that and model that in ministry. One of the first couples that we sent in this pattern, they're in Hawaii right now, and we still maintain contact with them. Justin and his wife, Katie Grant, and they immediately got planted in another church there. They became part of worship. He's part of the worship team there. They were doing worship stuff with us and children's ministry. So there's a clear connection. I'm trying to get the church to send me to Hawaii to check on them, but that isn't happening yet.
Yes.
But we're just trying to rethink the way we do ministry here. And our numbers are small and our numbers are few. We've got to struggle. This church did like many churches did in the middle of the 2010 decade. They built a worship center because they had grown and they were filling it up every Sunday and they were having 2 services. And so they built this big, huge worship center and we're still paying the mortgage payments. So that's difficult. That's hard. That's a lot of money that's going into a mortgage that can't be used for ministry right now. So that's a struggle for us right now.
Now, you had mentioned earlier to me that you're sending these missionaries off.
Mm-hmm.
And your missions program is funded by?
The federal government. See, here's the way we see it, is the U.S. Army will bring us missionaries, bring us recruits. And then if we pour into them, we love them in the name of Christ. We encourage them to grow up in the name of Christ and to see themselves as missionaries in the context that they're living, where they're in their platoon, their units, whatever their job is, wherever they're living, and to understand that the church isn't a geographical location, but rather it's the people of God. And once we get people to understand that, because that's what the book of Acts is all about, once we get people to grasp that and understand that, then when we send them, wherever we send them, the federal government is going to pay for their relocation. And so the church we snicker about that, we laugh about that, but we have to understand that, think about Paul. One of his greatest missionary journeys was back to Rome. Who paid for that? It was the Roman government. I mean, they funded it. There's a centurion traveling with him and accompanying him all the way back all the way to Rome. And clearly, God was using whatever. I laugh about the book of Acts where Paul spends the night in Herod's castle. I know he probably was in prison, but think about it. Herod built that castle as a summer retreat probably for himself. And Herod was dead now. And Paul was living in this castle. I mean, I'm sure didn't have the best room in the house, but I think that's hilarious. I think, God built a place for Paul to spend the night. So,
well, Ken, you have been around the block and up and down and over and out in ministry and in life for a long time. What advice, I'll just have this be the last question. What advice would you give to other leaders and people who are serving and pastoring and planting? You've got a wealth of experience. What tip do you have for us?
Well, there's a couple of things I think about. One, I think the one thing that came to my mind when you said that initially is this, is that I've come to this realization that what I think, assume, or believe about other people says more about me than it says about them. Because most of what I've discovered is what I think, assume, and believe about you, JD, is shaped by my perceptions and my experiences. And I have to remember that before I engage in a conversation with you, because what it then impresses on me to do then is to ask questions and to understand the person more. Because what I probably have, the assumptions that I've made are probably wrong, because I don't really know you. I don't really know this person that's standing in front of me. I'm making a lot of assumptions about what I think about a soldier, or what I think about a person that talks this way or acts this way. All those things have, and the older I get, the more of those presuppositions I have. And so I've had to, in fact, I've got that written on a 3x5 card hung up in my office to remind myself that, what you think, believe, or assume about others says more about you than it does about them. And if we could just stop and understand that, grasp that.
That's good.
And the other thing that has always hung with me, and I'm not this smart, somebody else has said this, is that hurting people hurt people and are easily hurt by people. And if people hurt me, it's because they're hurting. And if people are lashing out at me, it's because they're hurting. And when I lash out, it's more likely it's because I'm hurting. And I need to discover what's at the core of that. Why am I hurting? What's really going on here? Did JD just make me mad because he said XYZ? Maybe it's just I was already mad because I had to move cattle this morning, or I had to carry off I had to do something I really didn't want to have to do this morning. And that's what angered me. And now he's just a safe place I can dump it on. So.
Did you really move cattle this morning?
I really did move cattle this morning. See, that's the other part of what we're doing. Kelly and I bought a little farm. It's not much, 16 acres, but it adjoins my parents' farm. They had 16 acres, and that's another story. Back in the day, this farm was owned by a friend of the family, and so our house is literally up in the woods. And by the way, again, JD, it's an hour from Nashville. Nashville is an incredible place to visit. And we have 2 bedrooms, extra bedrooms. So you and Lori could come, and we live literally in the woods. There are times in the fall of the year when all the leaves fall, you can't see our road. It doesn't look like there's a road there. So it's fun. Anyway, so one of the things that we're doing is we're raising calves. I bottle fed 10 calves this winter, and those calves are now, along with my nephew, he's got some calves, are now out in our field, and we're rotating them. And so this morning they had to be moved from where they had eaten all the grass to another area, and then that area will start to recover, and then they'll eat here, and then we'll keep moving them around the field until eventually. And the plan there is just to restore the health of the land.
Well, great. So we're just going to say, anybody who's listening to this podcast, you have a free room and board there with Ken and
serious.
Kelly.
One of our dreams when we bought this house was that we would like the house to eventually become a place where people can come and get away. So ministry wise, because we know what ministry does to people. So.
I wouldn't entertain staying in too many people's houses, but at your place, I think maybe. And then does that include a steak dinner at night? You get all that cattle.
Well, I don't know about a steak dinner, but I tell you what, I can fry up some eggs because we got chickens too.
Well, hey, thanks so much, Ken. Thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for your just your example of consistency and commitment and doing what God calls you to do, even though as long as I've known you, it seems like every position you stepped into, God pretty much drastically changed that and said, no, that's not what we're doing. We're doing this.
Yeah. Well, God's blessed us, and he's been faithful and through all of it. So, and JD, thank you for the things that you have invested in me, the words and the encouragement. And I think about other friends of ours, Dave Bennett, a couple of other guys. My mind just has gone blank, but they just have been such a blessing to me. And Kelly and I, we've appreciated the friendship. So,
well, you've been a blessing to us as well. God's faithful, and so are you. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Hey, God bless you guys. Take care.
Thanks for joining the Leading Conversations podcast. We hope that you found it both helpful and encouraging. At Excel Leadership Network, our focus is on the church planter rather than the church. If you'd like to find out more about us, visit our webpage at excelnetwork.org. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. See you next time with another Leading Conversation.